Okay, I'm very nervous. I'll just start out with this. My name is Catherine and I am a Hyperemesis Gravidarum survivor. Now that I said that out loud and I didn't cry, and today I'm going to tell you my story, my personal story about pregnancy and hyperemesis, and I don't have a script to go off of, and that's very weird for me. And I hope that you'll just bear with me, and if this video can help even just one person, then I feel like it's worth it. Okay. So I got pregnant on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2019. Don't ask me how I know that, I just know it. I took pregnancy tests on February 28th and it was positive, and then the second one was negative. It's very strange, so we really didn't know what was going on. I had flown from California to Florida to visit my husband during spring training. Flew home from Florida to California, threw up the entire flights, both of them. Called the doctor when I got home, told her what was happening. She prescribed Bongesta, which is basically just a B12 or B1, B something. I should know this better, sorry. It didn't do anything for me, so that's why I don't know anything about it, because it was So at this point, I was about 4 weeks pregnant. I could not keep any food or water down. I was throwing up probably about 15 times a day, and I was starting to get really scared and concerned. I thought, okay, wow, this is just really intense morning sickness. Everybody gets this, like, buck up, Catherine, don't be a pussy. I finally, on the 10th, was like, okay, I'm in a lot of pain. My stomach hurts really bad. I'm throwing up constantly. This can't be good for me to not be able to keep any water down even at this point. So I finally called my mom. I told her what was going on. Mom, I have good news and bad news. Good news, I'm pregnant. The bad news, I'm definitely ill. She got on a plane immediately and flew down. She lived in Sacramento, so only an hour away. She flew down, she walked into my bedroom. I was in bed, and she took one look at me and she said, you need to get in the car, we're going to the emergency room. You're dehydrated, it's not good. Okay. My mom comes down. She takes one look at me, laying in bed, very, very sick, and we get in the car and we drive to the ER. So that's March 10th, first visit to the ER. They basically just diagnosed me with dehydration. I hadn't even been confirmed pregnant yet. I hadn't even had a doctor's appointment because they wouldn't see me till 8 weeks pregnant. I was only 4 weeks pregnant. And they had to do an internal ultrasound at the emergency room because they couldn't do a normal one. I was way too early. They did confirm the pregnancy. So they sent me home that night after giving me some IV fluids and a little bit of, what'd they give me? Reglan. They gave me Reglan, which I hated Reglan. It was the worst. It made me feel so crappy. So for the next week or so, they just said you need to just try and contain the vomiting and stay hydrated, which, okay, I'm throwing up everything I drink, but okay. So we went to my holistic doctor and just got IV fluids as often as we could, like every other day. Well, I started throwing up the IV fluids. We got to the point where we were just doing a saline drip and I was throwing that up. So at that point, I couldn't keep down anything. My mom and I were getting super scared and worried. I was really, really, really sick. And they told me if I wasn't having a bowel movement once every week that I had to go to the ER. Well, I wasn't. I went 9 days, but I wasn't eating or drinking anything. So how was I supposed to have a bowel movement? So I finally go to the doctor appointment on the 22nd. I have my first ultrasound to officially confirm the pregnancy. That was rough. That was a rough appointment. I remember laying on the floor in the waiting room for my ultrasound. I threw up 3 times on the ultrasound table, and then I like crawled over to the doctor's office. It was also the first time that I saw her heartbeat, heard her heartbeat, heard both. And I just bawled. Just bawled and bawled, because it had been almost a month of me just fully believing that my body was not accepting the pregnancy and was rejecting it and having a miscarriage. I mean, that's literally just all I thought for a full month. So it was very, very emotional and relieved when I heard and saw that heartbeat. It's still to this day one of the most emotional days that I've ever had. So woo. So then she sends us home. We had a long talk about hyperemesis, how we needed to try and control it, and what our plan was moving forward. Fast forward to that night. I don't 100% remember why we ended up in the ER that night, but that same night on the 22nd, we ended up in the ER. At this point, I'd lost 15 pounds. I was extremely dehydrated. I hadn't had a bowel movement in 9 days, which that's probably why we went. It was really bad at that point. They actually ended up admitting me to the hospital for 4 days. They were administering continuous IV fluids, IV Zofran, IV Raglan, and oral Pepcid. It actually controlled my vomiting to about 5 times a day, which was a big improvement from 15. We decided that I needed to be set up on home health care, that my body wasn't going to be able to sustain on its own. I also needed a Zofran pump, which is really disappointing to me. Up until this point, I'd really tried to keep the amount of medicine that they were putting into me to a minimum, just because you're pregnant. You don't want medicine in your body. You don't want anything in your body. But I wasn't doing well. I couldn't keep up the way that I was at that point. My body wasn't going to be able to last. I went home on March 23rd, I had the first real phone call with Andrew since coming home from Florida while I was in the hospital. We have a picture of it. I'll post it here. And I was able to walk around the hospital floor. So up until that point, even just talking the way I'm talking now would make me throw up. La 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 la. La 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 la. So we got discharged on the 25th with an IV, which was a whole debacle. I begged them not to put it in my wrist, and for some reason, well, they couldn't get it into this area because I was so dehydrated. I forget what they call that. So I wanted it in my hand, and they said, no, you have to have it in your wrist. And it was so freaking painful. So we had some IV kits at home. Don't ask me how. My mom's a nurse. And when we got home, I had my mom take it out and redo it because, it was horrible. So the lady from home health comes and she walks us through everything with the IV fluids. I was gonna have to have a home health nurse come every 3 to 4 days to change my IV. And I was on a Zofran pump. Basically what a Zofran pump is, it's like an insulin pump, but you have to change it every other day. It's not like a continuous catheter that you have when you're on insulin. You basically take this little like round needle and you just jab it into your stomach, not exaggerating, and then it administers the medicine through that needle, like pumps it through every however long. So it's a continuous dosage of medicine. Although on the 28th I took a shower for the first time in a month, and that was both fantastic and awful. Showering and brushing my teeth were the worst when it was really bad. I didn't brush my teeth for a really long time. I don't want to talk about it. Every 3 days, the home health nurse would come and she would change my IV, which got really challenging because I was very dehydrated. And I had also had so many IVs at that point that my veins were collapsing. One time it took her 6 tries, 4 different veins. That was mentally challenging. I was just sitting, holding my arm like this, just breathing, looking away from her, while she's literally taking the needle and going tick, 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 in and out of my arm to try and find the vein because she can't get the needle in the vein. It just makes me really sad for I didn't bring tissues in here. How silly of me. It makes me really sad for little kids who have cancer and have to go through all these things that I went through for a really long time. Yeah. So March 25th to like April 21st. So I had like a month at home with the IV fluids and the Zofran pump. On the 5th, I had a viability scan. And the reason that is listed on my medical chart is uncertain viability of pregnancy. That was really hard to read. So during that month, I was probably throwing up like 8 to 10 times a day. Something I haven't talked about yet is the excessive saliva that comes with hyperemesis, and it's so gross. It's so disgusting. I would literally have a cup and I would spit in it every 10-15 seconds because my mouth would just fill to the brim. Like if you open your mouth, it would like fall out of excessive saliva. And it tasted horrendous because you can't brush your freaking teeth. So I was losing a lot of weight. I was checking my ketones every morning through like a little pee stick. They call it a dipstick. That's the medical term for it. And they had warned us that with hyperemesis, it actually gets worse between 13 and 16, which we couldn't comprehend it getting any worse, but it did. And during when I hit 13 weeks, things took a really bad turn. I started throwing up just constantly, anything that hit my stomach, anything, water, a cracker, a like little bit of popsicle, anything that hit my stomach, I threw it right back up immediately within minutes. My ketones were starting to have protein in them, which was bad, and I had lost so much weight. By April 23rd, I was down to 107 pounds, which means I had lost 30 pounds in 2 months, or a little under 2 months. Yeah. It almost was like every day I was just fighting to get to the next day. Just get through today. Luckily, I was able to get some sleep at night. I would only throw up like once or twice a night. And I just wanted to get to the next day. Just get to the next day, just get to the next day, just get to the next day. Because if I thought of it in long term, I couldn't comprehend life being like that for the entire pregnancy. So I had to just one day at a time, one throw up at a time, one sip of water at a time, one new IV poke at a time. I was seeing the doctor every single week. And we were just trying so hard to avoid a midline and avoid more intense drugs and avoid anything that was going to put my baby at risk. So we just took it one day at a time, and I just did the absolute best I could to survive that day to get to the next day. And that's a really weird and life-changing thing to go through. I had a really bad night on April 21st. I hadn't had a bowel movement in like 9 days, and my dad and I were arguing about going to the ER, and I just really, really, really didn't want to go to the ER. I hated going to the ER. I lost a lot of weight. When I weighed myself that morning at 107, I was worried. I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for the 23rd. And I just wanted to get to that appointment. I felt like I needed to like get to that appointment without going to the ER. So I was on the ground in the fetal position in my bathroom, giving myself an enema, and I couldn't do it because every time I laid down in that position to try and do it, I would throw up. And I was throwing up stomach acid, and I was throwing up blood, and I was in so much pain. My throat felt like somebody had poured fire down it. I could barely talk because my stomach was so, or my throat was so burned from the stomach acid. I was crying. My dad was my dad was sitting on his knees behind me, begging me to let him take me to the ER. And I just wouldn't do it. I just didn't want to go. So I called the doctor, told them that there was blood in my throw up. They said it was okay. The things that they tell you are okay when you call on the phone are insane. When I walked into the doctor's office that morning, she basically sent me straight to admitting. They got me going on an IV for fluids, and we consulted with probably about 3 or 4 other OBs and a high-risk doctor and a hospitalist. And everybody's consensus was that I needed a PICC line and I needed to be put on TPN. Immediately when they put the PICC line in, they started to administer the TPN, and we tried a new nausea medicine called Kytril. And Kytril is most commonly used for cancer patients. It's a serotonin blocker. I was there for 7 days. I was finally able to eat. The first thing I ate was a pancake, and I can confidently say that it was the best pancake I've ever had in my entire life. It's a hospital pancake, and it was delicious, and I ate it every single morning that I was there for 7 days. And the crazy thing is that as soon as we started the Kytril, things made a 100% flip, 180. I almost stopped vomiting completely. I went from vomiting 25 times a day to 1 or 2, which was insane. I was able to start eating, not so much drinking. It's crazy because the most challenging thing through all of this was drinking water. Drinking water was the hardest thing to do through all of this. It's insane. So once I was there for a week and we felt comfortable, we discussed sending me home on home health TPN. This is where this one's hard. So we went home on April 30th, and the home health nurse came. The TPN was going for about an hour, and I started to feel funny. And I was just kind of like, okay, I don't really know what this is, but I feel funny. And I kind of told my mom, you know, I feel funny. My mom was with me again at this point. My mom and dad kept switching back and forth, taking care of me. And all of a sudden I was like, Mom, I'm gonna throw up. And so she brought me a little bin, and I just started uncontrollably vomiting, just one after another, after another, after another, this like warm, but it didn't burn. That was such the weird part, is it wasn't burning. It was this warm, weird liquid, and I could feel my stomach just like doing this, and just aggressive, uncontrollable, like purging of everything in my stomach. And we freaked out. We had no idea what was happening. I was my mom had ripped out the TPN thing, and I was on the floor on my hands and knees just throwing up into this bin. And she's on the phone with the home health people and whatever, and they said, you need to go straight to the emergency room. We jump in the car. I'm throwing up in the Jeep. I'm crying and shaking, and I'm telling my mom, this is it, isn't it? This is it. This is what we've been so scared about. This is the miscarriage. The whole time I just felt like I was just fighting to not miscarry, and that's every woman's worst nightmare. And to be so sick and to be such like an uninhabitable place for her. I don't even know how to put it into words. They wheel me in. So as soon as they wheeled me in to the ER, I started having like seizure-like symptoms and was having uncontrollable diarrhea, and I couldn't breathe. And then as soon as as they were wheeling me back, I started to have this crazy pain in my lower back. Just crazy, like nothing I'd ever felt before. It was different. It wasn't necessarily that the pain was worse than any other pain, but it was just a different type of pain. It's something I'd never ever felt. And for the next about hour or two, my body just continued to purge everything that was inside. And I was admitted back into the hospital. My liver enzymes were out of whack. So basically, for some reason, my liver was shutting down. And they sent in a hospitalist to run some more tests and to kind of explain what was going on. And he couldn't explain what was happening. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't know why my body was reacting that way to the TPN. They weren't even sure that it was the TPN that it was reacting to. To this day, there is no conclusive answer about what happened that night, which is super scary and super weird. The insane part about all of this is that Adeline was completely fine the whole time. Her heart rate never dropped. She never stopped growing. How's that possible? I couldn't understand. How's that possible? How's she fine? But she was. I remember a high-risk doctor came in one day, and I was in the hospital bed, and I was just sitting watching TV, and he asked me, he sat down on my bed, and he said, I need to ask you, how are you? And of course I was like, oh, you know, I feel better, and I was able to eat this morning, you know, I'm going through all the facts. And he grabbed my hand and he said, no, how are you? And of course, like, you know, when someone looks straight into your eyes and they just like truly are asking you how you're doing. So I kind of told him, you know, what I was feeling, that I didn't understand how she was fine in there when my body is just a mess. I felt like I was failing her. Said to me, you're wrong. And I was like, I'm wrong? What do you mean? And he said, your body is doing the most miraculous thing right now, in that it's using your body to keep your baby safe. That's why you are so sick, because your body is making sure that your baby is getting everything that it needs. And so really, all you have to do is stay strong enough and work through all of this and just let your body do what it's doing. And I'll never forget that conversation, and I'm definitely paraphrasing it because it was really special.